Hello, and welcome to Retro Encounter, episode 89, RPG Fans Retro Games Podcast. We're coming at you this week with fresh produce. I'm your host, Robert Fenner, and joining me today is Michael Sollosi.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm all right. And I have a question. Is it now, regardless of this episode's title, is the way I'm supposed to pronounce this word produce or produce?
Oh,
I'm truly not sure. Because this is one of those
yeah.
this is one of those words like permit or record or record where the meaning changes depending on where you stress the syllable.
Maybe the most important thing is the exclamation mark at the end,
Oh, okay.
but then it could be produce or produce.
Either way, they're definitely excited about either fruits and vegetables or making things.
Please, somebody write in at retro@rpgfan.com. So, Produce or Produce were a small developer in Japan, naturally, who were formed in 1990 out of former IRM employees. In particular, its founder was Shinji Yamada, who was the director of R-Type.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, R-Type and Image Fight were the two that he was known for.
R-Type had a nice run of like 7 or 8 games over 20 years. Those are fun top-down shooters. That's a genre I like seeing new ones of on occasion.
They are really good. That I know that there was an R-Type recently, but that R-Type Final on PlayStation 2 was amazing.
That one was the one I remember like seeing in Game Informer and looking really super cool. Like R-Type Final and Gradius 5 were, if you like shmups on PS2, those two had you covered.
Oh yeah, for sure. So old Shinji Yamada, he took some pals from ARM and he started Produce, and he directed a little tetralogy of vaguely connected games that I guess we're calling the Produce tetralogy, and that begins in 1993 with the Seventh Saga, a game that Super Nintendo RPG fans will likely remember, but whether or not you remember it fondly or negatively, I guess it's a bit of a toss-up with this game.
Right. I should say I remember the Seventh Saga fondly. I played let's say the first 3 dungeons and 2 towns of that game probably at least 10 times. Because for those of you who aren't aware of the Seventh Saga, there's 7 main characters, and you choose one of them at the beginning, and you compete with the other 6, and can team up with members of the other 6 through the game. So there's a little bit of a non-linearity customization to it, and I liked that concept a lot. So I tried the very beginning of the game with each of the main characters a couple of times, and didn't always get very far because the Seventh Saga has some real brutal difficulty spikes and a necessary grind for progress that stonewalled me a couple times. But I eventually did beat that game and have a lot of fond memories of it. So when we were chatting about what Retro Encounter episodes to do, probably a couple months ago, you suggested the Seventh Saga and its sequels, and I was barely aware of those sequels. I basically knew that some existed, but didn't know anything about them, and that really intrigued me. So then we started talking about it, and here we are, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The funny thing about Seventh Saga's punishing difficulty, from what I understand, that's all the work of Enix America, who not only gave this game a bit of a butcher's translation job, but also
the translation is nonsense. Like, don't even try to figure it out.
Yeah, they gave it the old working designs treatment and boosted up all the enemy stats considerably. So, from what I understand, the Japanese version Elnard's not that hard. It's just kind of like an average RPG. I mean, I never tried out the Japanese version to compare, but
now I'm intrigued because if I can replay that game without the punishing difficulty just to re-experience it, that sounds fun to me. But I don't know if any effort has been made to try that because it does a lot of interesting things for a 1993 RPG. I think it's the first game I've ever played with a mini map.
Yeah,
Because
that
you get
weird like radar system.
yeah,
Huh?
it's I think in the mythology of the game it's a crystal ball, but it's basically a radar where you see enemy blips around there, and you can seek out or avoid them while
There's
navigate.
so many
Yeah,
though.
oh no, it's hard to avoid them. You're going to be running into a lot of them, even if you're trying to avoid every single one. And they move. I think they move as quickly or faster than you do most of the time. So it's,
Hmm.
but still, like having a mini map that is separate from the main map. It was really interesting to me, and added another level of gameplay to just navigating the main just navigating towns and not towns, but navigating maps and dungeons. And but really, what intrigued me about that game the most was being able to team build and having
Hmm.
having other characters join you, and some of them can betray you at certain points, and certain boss battles are one of the other heroes at random,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can get real screwed if the random hero that is in the castle holding the fifth rune is someone that's particularly strong against you, then you could be screwed and need a lot of luck to make it past there.
Hmm.
So like it's there's just so many interesting things at that game that I didn't really see in other Super Nintendo RPGs. That again, I played the very beginning of that game probably at least 10 times. Got to around a difficult midpoint one or two times, and grinded my way all through the end once.
Yeah.
And that one round, I played as the Tetsujin or cyborg, and I recruited the elf character as my sidekick for most of the game.
Yeah, yeah. The one of the most interesting things about this game is the bizarre choice of characters that you have. You know, there's
Yeah,
like the human, the elf, and the dwarf, and then like the robot man, the alien, and then like the demon who's basically just Baphomet walking around.
yeah, and there's two humans, but those are the seven characters. There's the human knight, the human priest, and then the five non-humans you mentioned.
Yeah,
It's real weird, and you don't, and especially if you pick the Tetsujin, who's basically a robot. He's the only really robot walking around until you find ruins with other robots at the very end of the game, and
yeah.
it allows you to get through one area just by basically a door with sort of a password without having to engage in any chicanery or sneaking around, which is one of the relatively fewer benefits to the robot character. But it's really interesting because depending on who your main character is, some characters will be willing or unwilling to join you, and NPCs will react to you differently. Especially if you pick the demon, no one really likes the demon, and the demon doesn't like anyone. But he's quite
Mm.
powerful. So if you level him up, up to par, then he can clear encounters solo faster than anyone else. The chances of another character willing to join you are very low. So a lot of save reload if you want to try and get a sidekick for the demon. But it does a lot of little things like that cool, very in a very interesting way. And the combat is basically just normal turn-based combat, but with some defend, attack,
Mm.
and mana management mechanics that are like different enough to make it slightly more uh, slightly more interesting than just a rote Dragon Quest clone. But it looks all right for a Super Nintendo game and does a lot of cool little things. And I probably would like that game even more if the story was a little more interesting and the difficulty was a little less punishing.
Yeah. Like, bits of it remind me of like an Akatoshi Kawazu game. Maybe I'm saying that just because Saga's in the title, but you know,
True, yeah.
having your choice of bizarre characters and certain events playing out differently, not vastly differently, but like that little element of randomization and these weird obtuse elements, like you know, depending on whether a character who you haven't picked joins you or decides to fight you, that character is removed from the world forever after you beat them. You've basically
That's
killed
true,
them.
yeah.
So, like if you kill the priest, well, whoops.
And sometimes just talking to them, they'll want to duel you, and I think
Yeah.
and that will remove them permanently. And again, one of the because what you're trying to do is obtain seven runes,
Mm.
and then defeat an ancient evil with those seven runes. And at one and the seven heroes are competing because they were sent from an order from the king to find the seven runes. And you're competing with the other heroes. And at one point, I think I mentioned this earlier, the boss that is holding one of the runes is just one of the other enemies,
Yeah.
one of the other heroes, and you can be quite screwed if if you're a frail hero and you run into the dwarf or the demon, or if you are a magicless hero like the robot or the alien and you run into run into like a real tank like the dwarf of the night, it can really mess you up. And but that dynamic I just thought was so interesting. And
Yeah.
there's a point at the middle of the game, if you're one of X heroes and your partner is one of X heroes, then they can betray you, steal all your runes, and escape. And you have to hunt them down and beat them, but they have all of the super runes and you have none of them. It's yeah, I hadn't played another
I
game
love
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
And it is a little wild. It's a little it is like a little bit like a Saga game, because those games have a lot of freedom in character types and character choices, and some semi-random elements in interacting with NPCs. Am I wrong in assuming that? Because I've only played a couple Saga games.
No, no, that's correct. I mean, in particular, I'm reminded quite a bit of the very first ones, the Final Fantasy Legend 1 and 2, that allowed you to make up your party of like humans, mutants, and monsters and robots. And then just, it's all about exploring this world. There's not so much a focus on character stories, but you've got a lot of options as to how you want to build your character.
Right.
Yeah.
So the sequels to Seventh Saga, Again, I think I mentioned this before. I was aware that they existed because I was, there was a point in the 2000s when I was trying to play all of the Super Famicom games that the Super Nintendo never got, and that's when I first played games like Seiken Densetsu 3 and Dragon Quest 5 and Tales of Fantasia.
Well,
So I heard about these other games, but I never played any of them. Could you tell me a little bit about them?
Well, sequel very loosely. The
Right.
through line here is the name Ramir. In Seventh Saga, it's been mistranslated as King Lemuel,
Yeah. Hmm.
which I guess is actually meant to be Ramir, who is the hero of the next three games.
Oh,
And
do you mind if I briefly spoil the ending of Seventh Saga to maybe
oh,
put
please do.
to maybe put this in better context?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Final Fantasy one twist that
Right.
we.
Right. We talked
Yeah.
about this off air a little bit.
Yeah.
At the very beginning of the game, Lemil is the king who is supposed to be this great hero in the past, and he gives you this quest to find 7 runes. And once you find all 7 runes, you basically are. I don't remember. Maybe I'm not remembering this perfectly clearly, but they allow you to travel back in time to defeat this ancient evil that you see mention of terrorizing the world in the past, like through the main course of the game. And when you defeat it, and it's but the circumstances of you defeating it cause your like soul to be cast into the nether or something, and you the main character, your soul becomes reincarnated into a person who ends up being the great hero Lemil.
It
So
was you
like
all along.
yeah, so basically Lemil, knowing that he exists because of this of an ancient hero, like basically creates that ancient hero in the present. But you don't hear anything about Lemil's accomplishments other than in the first several towns, a bunch of people mentioning how great he is.
And isn't it a bad ending for you too? Because the Lamille who gives you the quest is actually a demon who killed Lamille and took his place. So like,
Sort of, because like when you bring the runes back to Lemil, he attacks you. He isn't the real Lemil. And when defeating him, sends you back to defeat the ancient demon that's his master. Man,
oh my gosh.
it's vague. It's vague and it's not well explained. Um, but
Steins Gate over here.
yeah, but the general idea of it is Lemil was this great hero, and your soul becomes the infant Lemil at the very end of the game. And it's some Final Fantasy 1 Garland nonsense, but if anything, I don't know if it makes less sense or more sense than Garland and Chaos, which I still don't totally understand. But
I think Seventh Saga and its sequels, it's the spiritual sequels, whatever. I think they're all just so stark and weird that it kind of works here. Like,
yeah, well, yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, that crazy end game of Seventh Saga, it does sort of fit in with the rest of the game, because like the very first quest in the game is you defeat a demon named I think it's Ramus or Romulus in a castle, and after you defeat it, you realize an old lady tells you it's the ghost of the dead king's dog that was still guarding the castle out of loyalty and anger. And so it's like there's like a lot of the
He's not like a
vignettes in the
dog though, is he? If I
no,
remember.
no,
No.
he's a big demon looking thing, but
Yeah.
he's evidently the ghost of the king's dog. But but it's there's a lot. I mean, they're almost like Dragon Quest in that how the game is segmented into little vignettes that are self-contained in each sort of dungeon town quest. But they're dark and weird, and not written like a Dragon
Hmm.
Quest or a Final Fantasy game. So it's I don't know. Maybe that's why it appealed to me a little bit because it seemed like this stranger version of the RPGs on Super Nintendo that I loved, but it wasn't like any other game, like any other RPG of that time, which is
Well,
probably
like
why I remember I have such fond memories of it.
a lot of its contemporaries, they were either super deformed like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, or they were very bright in color
Hmm.
like Fantasy Star. And this had this very sort of subdued and kind of realistically proportioned characters. So it just everything about it just looked and felt different.
Yeah, the sprites actually look really good. They aren't super deformed similar games of that era, like you mentioned. And you mostly see your characters from the back in combat,
Yeah,
but the combat sprites look very very good and detailed, and maybe that appealed to me as well.
a
But
cool Mode 7.
yeah, but it's not a bad look. It is a muted color palette, but it is pretty good looking for a Super Nintendo game of that era. And the monsters are usually many times your size and are all kinds of like effed up looking demons and monsters that are considerably creepier than other games of that ilk.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly striking. I wished it wasn't such a chore to play. I played a little bit of it when it was current, and like, I think around the time that I played it, I also owned Final Fantasy VI. So it was like, well, I think I'd rather play that.
Yeah,
But
I'm not saying it's as good as a Final Fantasy VI or a Chrono Trigger,
yeah,
but it is not. But it's a at least maybe I'm overrating it, but I think it's a very good, very interesting RPG of that era that isn't really like anything else.
yeah, no,
And
it dared to
and
be different.
yeah, and again, because it's so difficult, by far the part of it I played the most was the first couple dungeons,
Yeah.
because I would get stymied at the fourth boss or so, and I only played it through once, and that was years after the fact when I was in my teens playing it. Not on a Super Nintendo, let's say,
Hmm.
where I had the benefits of fast forwarding and other tricks to mitigate grinding. But
Yeah, I could see that being more palatable.
yeah, but it's super weird and interesting, and I'm repeating myself, and I apologize, but like us planning this episode and talking about it now has me a little curious to replay it again, but also I know how frustrating it is at times, and I don't know. I'm working in a strange balancing act right now in my mind.
Hmm.
Do I really want to subject myself to this again? And then the answer is maybe.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I don't have that kind of nostalgia about this game in particular,
Right.
but yeah, I don't know. It's easy to fall down the nostalgia rabbit hole
But
when
okay.
talking about some of these.
Oh, can I give a Seven Saga strategy minute right now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, folks, if you want to play this game and are willing to put in the time and effort and suffering, rule number one: don't give yourself two characters that both equip heavy armor because you will never ever ever be able to afford heavy armor and weapons for all of them. So don't do the knight, the dwarf, or the demon together. Just pick one of those if you pick any of them. And second of all, uh, don't pick only physical bruiser characters. So don't do only the robot, alien, or dwarf, because then you won't have the important spells that'll let you win late boss fights. So the best way to play this game is to have one physical character and then back them by either the elf, the priest, or the demon that can back them up with magic. So like one of the armored characters and the elf or priest, or one of the brawler characters with the elf or priest or demon is the best party to set up. If you don't do a setup like that, then you will struggle a lot. Again, I beat the game with the robot and the elf, but one physical character and one character with some spells will be enough.
always good to strike the balance,
Yeah,
but
you need
could
to
always
strike the
do
balance.
a.
You need to strike the balance in this game. You really need to, because if you don't, if you don't have good physical attacks, then you will run out of mana in every dungeon, and if you don't have good magic, then you will not win any late game boss fights.
If you want a self-imposed challenge, try picking the priest. From what I understand, it's almost impossible, but
He's like the priest is the best second
doable.
character. Because he has one spell called Elixir that heals one character's entire HP and MP, which seems broken. and
It
and
does,
and
doesn't
kind
it?
and kind of is. And he can cast it on himself. But the thing is, at the very beginning of the game, he has no offense whatsoever, and
Hmm.
you can't get a second character until you beat the first two dungeons. So that's a pain in the rear.
That's crazy.
And also people betray the priest a lot for some reason. I mean, I forget exactly how the rules work, but if you pick the demon as your second character, he will always betray you at that point in the middle. And if you pick the dwarf or the alien or the knight, he'll like won't betray every character, but they'll always betray the priest or the elf.
Yeah, I have heard that.
So yeah, the priest is like the best second character because he'll join anyone except the demon, and he has a lot of insane healing magic. But he's hard to play as the main character. I remember hearing, I read somewhere on some forum decades ago that like the best party is the demon with the priest backing him up, but getting the priest to agree to go with the demon is like 1% chance in the
Yeah,
second
very,
half of
very
the
low
game.
odds.
So I don't, and then the demon's the one character with good offensive magic and good attacks, but
Hmm.
yeah, not much healing and only moderate defenses. Whatever, we've gone far over my minute for Seven Saga strats,
Sure.
so
Before
we can
before
call
we
it.
move on, an interesting bit of trivia I read was that the the female elf and Lux the Tatsujin will never be the traitor because they didn't want to account for female pronouns or Lux's weird all caps speak.
Right. Oh, huh. That's funny. Well, it is
Yeah.
true. I mean, I beat the game with those two characters exactly, and the elf did not betray me.
Hmm.
But I know that the elf, either of them can be that boss you fight around the midpoint. Shoot, I think I knew that the robot wouldn't betray you, but I don't. That was probably me again researching this game when I played it in the early 2000s
Hmm.
to win. But that is helpful, and the elf especially is a really good second character because she does not have expensive equipment, so she won't get in the way of you like armoring up the knight or the dwarf, and
Right.
she has okay healing and very good offensive magic.
Well, I guess we'll move on to the following year when Enix America brought us Brain Lord. A I played a heck of a lot of this game. This is a top-down action RPG with its focus on puzzles, hence the name. It was really built on its very, very difficult puzzles, and it delivers if you're into that kind of thing.
Okay, now
I think it's probably not aimed at kids.
I like a good RPG puzzle now and then, and you when you were telling me about this game off air, it was like some of the puzzles were math intensive.
Yeah,
Like,
the Brain Lord is you.
could you give me an example? Because I'm trying to visualize this here.
Okay.
And I've never played this game.
Get ready to tear out your hair. From what I remember, and this isn't a bonus puzzle. This is a puzzle in a regular dungeon just to get through the game.
And around where in the game are we here? Like beginning, near middle, or near end?
Near the middle.
Okay, all right.
So solve a mathematical equation, and then convert the sum to binary, and then solve a rather difficult box pushing puzzle to trigger some switches that correspond to the binary answer.
Oh wow.
And like some of these puzzles, instead of just blocks, there's balls that roll, or there's balls that roll when they see you, and it's a nightmare.
How much prompting does the player get to know to convert to binary and hit corresponding switches?
Not enough when I was 10, but I did try replaying this again recently. I got to the midpoint again, but then that was quite a little while ago. So I'll have to see if any of my adult knowledge will help me out with this game.
Because like I've done the Harvard puzzle hunting before and similar things, and they'll have puzzles like this, with little to no prompting. But I'm completing those as part of a team of other puzzle enthusiasts, and we're all in our 20s. And this is
Yeah.
and if playing this, if I was a preteen trying to figure this out, I probably would I would try to get rid of the cartridge as soon as either by selling it or not renting it again as soon as I could. That sounds maddening.
um, I think it's a really neat game, though. It's got a similar kind of art style to Seventh Saga. You can tell that the same character and chip artists designed the world, and it's got these massive bosses as well. Like you fight a giant cockroach at one point, and this is other boss that looks a little bit like the Death Star that you fight in a room that uses magnets to drag you towards it. It's got a much better translation this time as well, and quite a fun sense of humor.
Well, having a better translation than the Seventh Saga's translation isn't a very high bar to surpass.
Oh yeah, not at all. I'm not sure who they got this time, but it's head and shoulders above what they were doing just the previous year. So you're this adventurer and you're going around with this party, but they're not joining you. They're just NPCs that sort of show up in the different locations that you're in. And you help each other out by solving puzzles, or there's a girl who hates cockroaches and you have to go into the next room and kill the roaches so she can get by. And I liked just finding them and talking to them along the way. It kind of felt like you were actually traveling with a group, whereas like other games that were coming out that same year, like Breath of Fire, it was like party members would join you and that was it. Their story was basically over. They were just silent from then onward. So this feeling that Brainlord gave of like you're part of this group and everybody's got their own agenda and goals and personality. It was really fun to be part of.
And it's a persistent agenda. Like you're still interacting with them and helping them towards their goals later in the game, as sort of instead of a sort of here they are and forget the rest of them once they join your party deal like in Breath of Fire 1.
Yeah, indeed. Like at one point, one of the guys wants to get married, so like you go back to his town and go to his wedding, and then he leaves the group.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. But your actual party members are these little jade fairies. You pick up these gems along the way, and you can equip 2 at a time, and they all have their own little functions. Like one will attack enemies that it sees in the field, or one will light up a dark room. And they level up individually from these little gems that enemies drop. But there's so many of them that some of them are just useless. I mean, all you really need is the one that lights up the room. And I think there's one that it shows invisible floors, and there's one that heals you all the time. So you're pretty much golden with those.
There's 3 or 4 that will carry you through the game, and the rest are dead weight. But that sounds like an interesting system, especially in an action RPG.
Yeah, it's like 4 out of 16, I think. But... yeah, but there's your actual character doesn't have any RPG style progression. You find these items, consumable items that increase your stats in the world.
But then they have these dungeons with these brutal puzzles that may or may not feature binary conversion as part of their solutions.
Yeah, I mean they're a nightmare. Math with block pushing puzzles and platforming at the same time. It's a bit much.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, who maybe didn't always love math class, of course I wanted more math in my in my escapist entertainment.
Oh yeah. But one of the things that I like the most about this game is it's got this small world, and it changes and phases with the actions that you take and the dungeons you complete. It reminds me a little bit of like an Ys or a Legend of Heroes. Each time something happens in the story, almost every NPC gets new dialogue to reflect it, and it just feels so strange and intimate.
Just a world state that's constantly changing and rewards some level of continuing to explore places you've already been.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Brainlord mostly, a really punishing, weird little artifact of mid-90s Enix. I really like this game's music. It's by Masanao Akahori, who did Cybernator or Assault Suits Vulcan. I don't know if you ever played that.
I have not played that. That's unrelated to Metal Warriors? I guess.
Metal Warriors was kind of a homage to it.
Okay, all right. Because I mean, that's my gold standard for for Super Famicom giant robot fighting.
Oh,
But
you should play this one then.
oh, I'm intrigued definitely. But I'm intrigued by Brainlord in general, especially if I can skip most of the puzzles with a guide or something, because that seems like the least appealing part of the game to me. So if
Yeah, I do.
yeah, if I had a guide that would walk me through most of the puzzles, what would you think the runtime would be on this game?
Oh, gosh, maybe 10 hours?
All right.
10 or 15, maybe?
I could give it the old Seventh Saga first two dungeons try.
I mean, there's no grinding. You just have to collect all the stat healing items from all the chests, or the stat boosting items, rather. But
No, but that does sound interesting, and especially if it would be reliving some of the art and some of the vibe that Seventh Saga gave.
yeah, if you look at the games side by side, the towns in particular, you can tell they're by the same folks.
With the very sort of like the sort of boxy designs and rounded edges.
Yeah, kind of looks like everybody's sticking their stomachs out when they walk.
Yeah, a little bit,
Yeah.
because they have to fill the entire block of the sprite.
Yeah. High pedigree on this game's art, actually. This was hidden in the game's American release, as many Japanese things were at the time. This game's character designer was the shoujo artist Sachiko Kamamura, who did Heroic Legend of Arslan and City Hunter.
I love
So-
City Hunter. Wait, do you mean City Hunter, the manga that was written by the same guy that did Angel Heart? And
That's
Cat's Eye?
right.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
I'll send you the this isn't good for a podcast, but I'll send you the Japanese box art, which was
Okay.
also the cover of the American hint book.
I have a lot of affection for Angel Heart and City Hunter in particular, and having that character designer show up in a Super Famicom game is fascinating to me.
I should clarify. This artist Kamamura, she retooled the designs for the TV anime.
Oh, okay, but the
She didn't do the manga.
all right, well that's fair because the TV anime of City Hunter, which I have seen many episodes of, is an entertaining adaptation.
Yeah,
And it's 80s as hell, especially listen to that theme, man.
it's real good. Yeah,
Okay, so back to Brainlord. I may check out that game yet. I'm not sure.
it's worth a look. I mean, the first dungeon is completable. Things get pretty sadistic after that. So, I mean, give that a go.
Right on.
At the following year, 1995, Enix America had closed their doors. So, what few Enix published games we were mostly getting through Nintendo, and that was Illusion of Gaia. I want to say that Robotrek was the year before. Anyway, so nobody was putting out Enix's games in America, or if they were, very, very rarely. So
that's why America never got the Super Nintendo version of Dragon Quest VI at all, I guess.
That's correct. No such explanation for why we didn't get 5 and why they chose to bring over Paladin's Quest instead. But hey, who knows? So 1995, Produce gives us Mystic Ark, another game with a talented manga artist behind it. This time it was a duo of Akihiro Yamada, who did the art for Lotus War and the anime series Ra Zephon, and also the incredible Hitoshi Yoneda, who is a science fiction illustrator who did some incredible key art for the Japanese boxes of Phantasy Star 2 and 4, and also Sega's port of Swersarian.
Huh, okay.
So-
I am familiar with Razafon, mostly because one of my close friends really, really loves mecha anime of that era. But that's an interesting one.
So this is a peculiar little game. It basically plays almost exactly like Seventh Saga in terms of mechanics, but it feels kind of like an art house RPG, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Players choose between a male or female character, and it's Remir again, who is the hero of the past two games, or Ferris, the name of the female character, who also shows up as a party member in Brainlord. And you awaken in this shrine, and this disembodied voice claims to be a goddess and says that you've been trapped in the body of a small wooden doll and you need to find your way home. But you're never really told what your home is or really who you are. So it's got this really whimsical feel. Like there's like a talking fireplace, and you solve these little puzzles like throwing switches, and the screen transitions when you look at objects to like an adventure game view with menu options. So it's just got this really strange feel about it, and you end up, the first thing you do is you end up being teleported to this world where it's like some pirate ships with pirate kitties.
Go
Some
on.
like some pirate ships that are stranded on land.
Tell
and it's
me
like
more
pink,
about these pirate kitties, Rob.
Oh, there's pink cats and there's black cats, and they don't like each other, but they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd like to fight each other, but their boats are just stranded on land, so they can't get close to each
and the
other.
cat pellets.
Basically, yes. So it's just weird, You go through all these different sort of little vignettes, and you don't really find out who you are, at least not for a very long time. It's just all these little themed worlds, a little bit like Seventh Saga, but feeling even more abstract.
So it's like it's like disjointed, abstract vignettes that are maybe even slightly absurdist, if I'm interpreting you correctly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's ostensibly about self-discovery, but it's all of that's very vague until near the end of the game. So
Very vague.
So deliberately throwing the player off, I'm guessing, maybe deliberately. And deliberately hiding things from the players. Yeah, I guess art house RPG is a fair comparison. That sounds like David Lynch the RPG at times.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Did you ever play Soul Blazer, the Quintet game for Super Nintendo?
I have finished Terra Enigma and Illusion of Gaia, but I have never played Soul Blazer.
Okay. Well, those are much better games than Soul Blazer.
All right.
But,
we actually you're probably aware of this, but we did 3 Terra Enigma episodes in
yes.
in I believe late 2015 or early 2016 for this very podcast.
Indeed, we did. Check them out, folks. They are in the archives.
It's a good game, and those are good episodes.
You can hear Josh trying to start a battle by running into an enemy that kills him. So Soul Blazer, when you're killing enemies in that game, defeating all of the enemies in an area will restore something in this town. And that can either be a townsperson, or it can be like a sentient object or a flower. And so, you can talk to like an old man's broom and that kind of thing. I guess it kind of ties into Shintoism, where, if an object has been used and taken care of for so long, it turns into a minor deity. But I guess Mystic Ark kind of reminds me of that kind of world, but without the overarching RPG quest. It seems like you're just kind of like going through this world of, a sapient fireplace and a broom and a bunch of cats on a pirate ship in the middle of land. I gotta admit, I haven't gotten too far in this game. I've played it for maybe about 10 hours. I want to like it. It's got some really interesting ideas. It feels a little bit like a point-and-click adventure game, especially like those mid-'90s sort of Myst clones that went full-on surrealism, like Gadget, Welcome to the Future, and Juggernaut on PlayStation.
I'm aware of some of those games because one of my friends in particular kept trying to get me to play them, and I rebuffed them at every turn and went back to my safe, understandable Square RPGs.
Yeah.
But this sounds really interesting, especially now that I'm of a mindset that would tolerate this better than 13-year-old me.
I mean, it's got its own cruelty though, because you're solving these kind of adventure game style puzzles while having to deal with the radar system and the battles of Seventh Saga and all the grinding that requires.
Huh.
So I think I dropped off when I had to go to a tower full of traps, and it was all like pits that would drop me down, and block pushing and switch throwing puzzles and battling at the same time.
And you say this is someone who loves Nocturne and Digital Devil Saga.
Yeah. I would lower the encounter rate in those games if I could.
Sure, yeah. But
I'm very much of the mind that the golden rule is you shouldn't have puzzles and random battles at the same time. I think, break them up, have one or the other. It's bad.
in their defense, I know Digital Devil Saga does turn off the encounter rate in puzzle rooms sometimes, but
Yeah,
maybe not enough. But
not in the teleporter mazes.
right, they did in the oh shoot, in like some of the laser mirror rooms. I know they turned it off, but not. But you're right, not in the teleporter mazes, and not in the hall with trapdoor floors. But
Yeah.
anyway, we're off topic again. So
Uh,
so this game seems to
yeah.
but the puzzles never reach a brain lord level, do they?
Oh, not at all. They're standard, 16-bit Final Fantasy dungeon puzzles, like throw a switch to open a gate and then, get back across.
And
And even the block pushing is way simplified.
and you mentioned that it has different character designers than the previous two games, but does it look mostly like Seventh Saga and Brain Lord, or
No, it
oh,
looks
okay.
completely different. They've gone for the SD style, and it looks more like I guess Final Fantasy VI is probably a good comparison.
Mhm.
It's that kind of exaggerated characters. The battles look quite similar to Seventh Saga's battles, but the world itself, you got this short character with the big head and big eyes.
That's not a criticism necessarily though, because I mean,
No, it looks really
I
nice.
mean, in Seventh Saga, the battles are way cooler looking than the general navigation as well.
Yeah. I think I think it works here. I think it's appropriate because this is more of like a lighthearted and abstract adventure. So having this this kind of whimsical design to go with its whimsical story, whereas the previous two games felt, as I said, stark or maybe a little bit harsher.
Hmm.
This is very much more playful, I find.
Cool. I'm still a little concerned about the punishing encounter rate because I mean, there's so many games that I want to be playing that are even on my shelf and I'm not playing that I don't know how if it would be the best use of my time to go back to a 90s RPG with punishing difficulty that I'm not sure I want to play. But
I think maybe it's worth a look, but there are better 16-bit RPGs out there that you probably haven't
but
played.
again, I mean, I have this unusual amount of positive nostalgia for Seventh Saga, so I'm definitely intrigued by Mystic Ark, and even though its absurdist setting probably would have been annoying to me as a teenager, I probably would really dig something that was deliberately that weird, playing it as an adult.
Hmm.
Because I mean, when you think about it, like games are an excellent vehicle for this kind of stuff. Because I mean,
Yeah.
if the player buys into a world that's totally absurd, it can be so entertaining. Just wallowing in the craziness of a game. Like I mean, uh, like who doesn't love the look and absurdity in a game like Katamari Damacy?
Oh, for
Like,
sure. Yeah.
and so when a game is uh, really just sells its own look and its own weirdness, that there will be players that embrace that. So that part of this game is just fascinating to me. And if it's a mostly traditional JRPG with a tone and look like that,
Hmm.
it probably is something I want to play. But again, if it's just full of trapdoor puzzles and Seven Saga combat, I hesitate.
Hmm. Yeah, like trying to dodge enemies on that Seventh Saga style radar and walking into a pit.
That
um,
that got rough sometimes.
that is about where I stopped. um, I only found out quite recently that there was a direct sequel to Mystic Ark and a sort of capstone to this series.
And I was not aware of that at all. I was aware that there was a Seventh Saga sequel, and I maybe did a Wikipedia article check 10 years ago, and that's about it. So this is all brand new to me.
So in 1999, Produce released one of their last games after taking a bit of a sabbatical to help Hudson out with a few of the Super Bomberman titles. They're back with, I want to say this was one of their final games, if not the final game, Mystic Ark Maboroshi Gekijo, or Mystic Ark Illusory Theater. Now this is a follow-up that eschews the RPG mechanics almost completely. It's like a third-person tank controls adventure game that follows a similar kind of dreamlike vignetted format to its prequel, but with the puzzles and like sort of an action RPG or third person action combat, which is apparently very bad, are the focus here. So, from what I understand, at the end of Mystic Ark, spoilers, similar to Seventh Saga, the Remir or Ferris see themselves reborn into what's implied to be the real world. And Illusory Theater, it's set in this kind of vaguely European Victorian setting. Kind of looks like a storybook, and you play as Remir or Alice this time. And it looks quite a bit like a pop-up book in a way. I think they're deliberately channeling those kind of aesthetics. And I guess you're solving puzzles at the behest of a frightening scarecrow-looking circus ringleader with no eyes named Mr. Silver Fingertips, who promises...
That's okay.
if you bring him all of the Mystic Arks, he will bring back all the people in town who have disappeared without a trace. So that's what that is. I've played a tiny bit of this. I watched some videos of it as well. It kind of reminds me of the very early Gust game, Welcome House, which was basically an adventure game, but like it channeled Buster Keaton. It's
like 1920s silent era slapstick.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Before Gus did Atelier, they did this duo of these weird adventure games where you explore a house and you use objects on other objects, but it's like a crazy trap house, and you get hit in the face with pies and stuff, and there's no dialogue.
Man,
they're really weird games.
I was not expecting a Buster Keaton reference on this podcast recording, but. Yeah, well, anyway, listeners, you should watch The General. It's a silent film era comedy masterpiece. But and also Buster Keaton has a very memorable role in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is a very good movie musical. But anyway,
that's an excellent movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. He's the guy looking for his two long lost children. It was his last film role. He was great in it too. That movie's excellent. But wow, I mean, so. That last Produce RPG sounds, I mean, maybe even stranger, and I'm sort of less on board with the concept for it than I was with Mystic Ark, which genuinely intrigues me. And but
it's very, very weird looking.
And I guess because Produce was only around for about a decade. This is very late era Super Famicom, or was it?
Oh no, this was late PlayStation 1.
Okay.
This was 1999. And then I think they were done after that. I think some of them moved on to I can't remember who. I know that some of them went on to work with some people who left Telenet. I want to say the company had witches in their title, but I should have made a note, and I didn't. But yeah,
you would know better than I would. You're much more in tune with the staff of Produce and Telenet than I am. But that's fascinating. And this company was only around for a short time, but they made some really interesting RPGs that aren't really like any other RPGs of their era. Like I'm still my mind is still half blown away from you describing that Brainlord puzzle to me, and me like thinking that for many years that Seventh Saga was basically a standalone game, and it had these two sequels that were even weirder than it was is really fascinating to me.
So I'm trying to figure out what happened to Shinji Yamada, who, from what I understand, directed all of these games. And it looks like he might have just bowed out after Produce ended in 2000, which is a shame because he had some really bizarre ideas, if nothing else.
Yeah, shoot. I mean, like, would you, if he continued in the game industry, do you think he could have been some auteur level game designer, like dare I say a Suda 51 or a Yoko Taro?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, he and Suda were working at the same time, and I mean, Suda was doing weird things in the 90s.
I think Suda is doing weird things at all times, just living his life.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. But I mean, before the idea of the video games auteur was really a thing. They mostly
And
kind of flew under the radar.
I still don't love the idea of a video games tour, mostly because
Oh, absolutely.
I think there's too many moving parts in a video game to attribute too much of it to one person. But regardless, um, he does seem like a lost auteur that could still be making interesting games to this day if Produce didn't end with a whimper the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that he bowed out then, but I mean, so many interesting developers and companies just they just couldn't make that jump into the 3D generation, and I guess if they held out a little longer, Steam would have been there for them to make all the weird 2D games they wanted. But maybe we'll see some of these people come back. You never know. I mean,
Or maybe I think what's more likely is that younger designers that are up and coming may have been inspired by these strange games,
oh yeah,
playing in their youth and trying to create something from their own mind with these as influencers. I think is more likely because, I mean, if he hasn't been seen around game development in over 15 years, I think it might be over for Yamada-san. But I mean, I have a lot of affection and remember parts of the Seventh Saga very vividly, and it's I'm sort of glad that there were more games like it made by this company, and I am intrigued, and I kind of want to try both Brain Lord and Mystic Ark, but
I think at the very least they're worth firing up and having a peek at.
right, yeah, I may do that yet. The problem is, man, there's always too many games and not enough time.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I guess Enix or Square Enix now own the rights to all of these. It's a shame that we probably won't be seeing any of them on Virtual Console anytime soon, because that would be nice.
The Seventh Saga was definitely not on the Wii Virtual Console, and when I was buying up Nintendo games on that Wii Virtual Console, believe me, I had an eye out for Seventh Saga, and it never appeared.
Yeah, I mean they put up ActRaiser, and that was about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. There wasn't much other Enix stuff, and ActRaiser is an awesome game that I will forever be furious at because I never. You have to beat that game. You have to beat all 6 area bosses in a row and then a new final boss, and I absolutely could not do that. And I tried for weeks at a time to beat ActRaiser, and I never could. But
they did that again in Illusion of Gaia.
oh yeah, well it's harder in ActRaiser because for the
it's
area
a much
boss,
harder game.
For the area bosses in ActRaiser, I had to use like all of my magic and all of my spells just to beat the boss, and suddenly having to do all 6 in a row plus a 7th when my resources were more limited, it was not something I was equipped to do. That game is super interesting, and then just has a brutal finale that I couldn't make it through. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer that we never saw any of these Produce games on later services, because I think I would have picked it up on Virtual Console at least, and I mean if it appeared in some kind of bundle on either Humble or GOG or Steam, I would I mean unless the price was insane, I would be an instant buy for me.
Yeah, no, I mean absolutely. Even though I'm not even the biggest Seventh Saga fan, and I probably would pick up a copy just out of
I'm
novelty.
probably in the 95th percentile of Seventh Saga fans.
Yeah, you probably are.
That is a weird RPG. If anybody... I mean, there definitely are other people that remember it as fondly as I do, but it's in the lower tier of popular Super Nintendo RPGs of that era.
Yeah, there are better games, but it still stands apart from what it tried to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if anybody at Square Enix is listening, there are Produce fans out there. So,
or are there Produce fans out there? We're still not sure on that.
They're divided into 2 camps.
Ah, I see. The Pro camp and the Deuce camp. Oh, that's great.
Wow.
At least they all agree on the exclamation point, at least.
Well, I think we've pretty much exhausted the topic of this bizarre short series of 4 games. So I think that's a pretty good place to cap off, unless you have any final thoughts.
Oh, man. I don't have any final thoughts other than I'm intrigued by Brain Lord and Mystic Ark, and I wish I could legally buy Seventh Saga on a modern platform somehow. But I'm I'm not 100% sure either any of those things will happen.
Stranger things have happened. Well, folks, thanks very much for listening. Mike, where can people find you online?
Right, I am Monsoon on the RPG fan forums. I am at the Real Monsoon on Twitter for most of my thoughts, and at Evoker for Dogs for my thoughts on Japanese superheroes and Blizzard multiplayer online battle arenas. And if you want to email me, that's my last name, Sollosi at rpgfan.com.
Okay. You can find me on the forums as Townscar Marty, and you'll probably also see me reviewing the occasional game at rpgfan.com. On Twitter, you can find me at misanthrobob. I got a website, misanthropop.com. I wrote a short piece talking about why Telenet sampled Kraftwerk in the game Exile. So if you're interested in some bizarre illegal sampling in an old RPG, check that out.
When I saw you post that it was a combination of proper nouns I never ever thought I would ever see. In one article title.
Thanks for making that happen, Telenet. Stay tuned next month to beat the summer heat with some upcoming episodes on Earthbound and Danganronpa 2. They will be airing throughout July. You can write in at retro@rpgfan.com, and we appreciate all your fan mail.
Yep, we will read anything that is directed to us and respond to it as long as it isn't, extremely rude or racist. But that hasn't happened yet, thank goodness.
Please be nice to us. Don't mess with us. Okay, thanks again for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Have fun, everyone.